So, hello everyone. It's 3 past the hour. Thank you very much for joining the webinar today. And our topic today is Ask the Customer Leadership Expert, Thomas Barta, how to make change in CX happen and why AI plays a crucial role. So everyone here in the webinar, feel free to post your question in the chat, and as soon as possible, we try to answer them if we see it actually. And let me actually introduce you our today's famous guest, Thomas Barta. He is a former McKinsey partner, and he knows not only the C-suite. Thomas trained over 1,000 McKinsey leaders on impact without formal authority. And he also conducted the largest global study to date, involving over 68,000 assessments on what makes an impactful customer leader. Thomas is the author of the #1 marketing leadership book, and he's columnist for Marketing Week and Forbes. My name is Frank Buckler, founder and CEO of Success Drivers. We are a provider of AI-based insight solutions. So let me start right away with a question to Thomas. Thomas, you wrote this book, The 12 Powers. Could you quickly illustrate what are those 12 powers and how does this relate to customer experience?
Very happy to. First of all, welcome to everybody and thanks for joining. Looking forward to the talk. And by the way, I'd love to have your questions because that's the fun part and hopefully helps all of us to learn because there's a lot to learn in customer experience. Now, I tell you that the reason for writing a leadership book for marketers, which is indeed the 12 Powers, is a very simple one. I was a marketer. I was a McKinsey partner who helped marketers make customer experience happen, and it was damn hard. And it wasn't because we didn't know what it takes to be, what a great experience looks like or, what customers want. We knew that. But the hard part was to make it happen in the company, to get the people in the company to be convinced to help us play. And that's really what this session will be about, at least on my end. This is what I can help with, and this is why we wrote the 12 Powers. The 12 Powers are all about what marketers, what customer experience leaders, what insights leaders can do to actually get the company moving, because that's what we need in customer experience. We don't need to know what the experience looks like. Well, we do know, but we need to find that out too. But we need to mobilize the people to make it happen. That's the trick, and that's the reason for the book. Now, Frank, you asked me what the 12 Powers are. Let me briefly answer the actual question before handing back to you. The powers are all about leading other people. In fact, when you as a customer experience leader or an insight leader or an expert in your field want to be successful, you got to know your stuff. You got to know your tools, your technologies, the things that Frank will talk about, the AI methodologies to be really good. But what you really have to figure out is how to lead the people around you so they make better decisions. So, for example, leading your boss, bosses often have it wrong. And what can you do with the insight you have to actually convince them that maybe they should change course? Mobilizing your colleagues, helping them figure out, how to make better decisions. There's the famous case of United Airlines. You probably have seen this last year, right? They dragged, actually it was almost 2 years ago by now, they dragged this paying passenger out of a plane, he had a bloody nose afterwards. The thing is, you can measure as much as you want in customer experience. If you don't talk to all the people who make it happen, right, these things still go wrong. So you need that. Of course, then you need often to mobilize a team if you have one. Some people have a team, other people don't have a team. So depending on that. And finally, mobilize yourself. And that means, this is hard work. This is going to be really hard work, even if you have great data. Some people may just walk over you. So you got to have some reason to believe what you're doing is right. So you got to mobilize yourself. I'll talk later on, Frank, a little bit about the gaps you have in marketing, but that's kind of like, that's what you have in the 12 powers. So those are the things you need to have on top of all your wonderful data.
I know your research was basically focusing on marketing leaders, and are those insights really applicable to also lower hierarchies? So can, for instance, even a customer insight leader according to those insights?
Yeah, it's a great question, Frank. And what's fascinating, I was just with customer insights leaders in London. We had a session with Aura, which is a network of customer insights leaders in the US, in the UK, and we spent a good 2 hours talking about these. And I tell you, everybody in the room said, yeah, that's exactly what I need to do. I have all these good ideas. I have these reports. I have these insights. I have the data, all right? And the people aren't listening. They're not doing it. So I just keep producing the data. And so, yeah, we all agreed that marketing and insight leaders need to actually find ways to get their good ideas into the company. So yeah, it's totally applicable. Of course, it will look a little bit different, right? What you do. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. But the principles that you as a leader in a company, and a leader, I mean everybody, right? The moment you join and you want to make something happen, you're a leader. And if you want to make something happen, it's true for everybody, even in HR and in finance. You have to find ways to mobilize your boss. You have to mobilize all the colleagues that don't report to you. Yes, absolutely. It's very applicable for everybody here on that call.
So actually, Thomas, why is it so difficult to convince the C-suite or higher management in marketing? So isn't it enough to make some good reports and show some data?
So here's the challenge. Everybody has in the insight profession, everybody has in the marketing profession, everybody has, if you're an expert in the field of customer experience, everything you talk about is about the future. Almost everything. Just imagine, right, how much of the work you're currently preparing, you're currently busy with, how much of this is about the future customer behavior, the future revenues, the future profits. Well, for most people I know, it's, 80, 90%, yeah, you do some old reports, but basically you're all helping the company move forward. And what do people typically say when someone claims, I know the future? Right? A lot of people will be really cynical because they're saying you don't know the future. And that is the trick. So as a leader in your field, you will always have a massive trust gap, because when you stand next to someone from finance who has the old numbers, everything you say will sound a little bit less reliable, because it is. So, and if you're really, really good, you become a very trusted fortune teller. But you have to remind yourself that first of all, and first and foremost, specifically with bosses in the C-suite, the people here on this call, the people, unless you are a CEO, the people in companies always are facing a big trust gap.
Mm-hmm. So we have a trust gap, and yeah, of course, and we want to change and drive CX. But then I know you also recently probably read about this news that there are many indicators that really change in CX isn't happening. So actually we don't see across the industry, we don't see much improvement. So I could have a diabolical question.
Yeah.
Does CX actually matter? Is it important?
No, it's very important, but I mean, and I think we all know this, and I'm sure we'll come to this. And I mean, you are the expert in figuring out how important every part of it is, and that's hugely important, of course. But the problem is not only the boss, right? Even if you have a CEO, and a good friend of mine, he is a CEO of a large automotive firm, and he tells me, you know what my problem is? I don't have all the power. I'm the CEO, I don't have the power, because I can say things, but, it could easily be that people, 1 or 2 levels down in the company are just not doing it, right? They may just dragging it out or delaying it. So to think that someone has the power is wrong. And the truth is, we all don't have the power. You know, no matter where you work in a company, if you're the department boss, if you're the country boss, if you're you always have other people that don't report to you. That can make your life really difficult. And just think about your own organization. Think about the places you work in. I mean, if you work for yourself, of course, then your organization is smaller, but then think about your clients. You mean, you know, just imagine your client's organization or your organization had the best possible customer experience. You know, all these 5-star ratings and everything's wonderful, and you're cited in all the blogs for these wonderful experiences. I mean, how many people in the company will have to join in? Well, typically many. I talked earlier about United Airlines, and there are many other cases. And how many of those people report directly to you or to your department or to your boss's department? Typically just a fraction. And that's why, you know, everybody who is involved in customer experience is always facing a very large power gap. And don't hope one day you'll become so senior that the gap vanishes. It won't. Again, my friend, the CEO of an automotive company, says he doesn't have the power, right? He needs to convince the people. So everybody who is working in CX and who tries to improve it, you know, has to work through a lot of other people. And that is not something you should complain about, because that is the norm. That's the reality. It's just that people don't talk about it this way, right? We have a head of customer experience or head of this and head of that, and they think, I now have the title, people will listen. The truth is, they sometimes do and they sometimes don't. Mm-hmm. So as a CX leader, you have to find ways to mobilize people that just don't report to you, to bridge that power gap.
Mm-hmm. So it comes to this wonderful, so you spoke about that we have a power gap and we have a trust gap.
Oh, you listened to my talk earlier. Okay.
Yeah.
Well spotted.
Yeah, okay. I'm prepared, you know.
Okay, wow.
Is this really how you can boil it down, those 12 powers in CX?
Yes, I mean, well, that's the problem, right? I mean, the gaps are the ones you have to overcome. And now I assume, of course, that people are generally well intended, and, you know, there is a general belief that a good experience makes sense. You know, I mean, if you work for a monopoly in some autocratic country, maybe nobody cares. But I'd say for a normal company, CX is important. People intrinsically understand this kind of. But then you're facing exactly these two gaps, the power gap and the trust gap. Mm-hmm. And everybody does. And I tell you what, when I was at McKinsey, I was so excited. I led McKinsey's customer experience service line. That's basically what it means is I was the knowledge center for the best practices in this. And when I got the job, well, when I applied, I mean, it's how it works, right? You get assigned these leadership roles. And then I was really excited. And someone says, well, you were in for a steep hill. I said, why is that? Well, so because, you know, every company, right, agrees, but then not so hard. And it comes down to the gaps you talked about, Frank. It's about the power gap and it's about the trust gap, the things we have to overcome to make it actually happen.
So, and you know many industries and companies. So what are the main ways to overcome those gaps? Because that's most interesting, right?
Yeah. Okay, so let's take them one by one, because there are a couple of things you can actually do as a leader. I mean, the first thing, and that I find is quite important for everybody here on the call, is to accept that these gaps exist. And even whatever they tell you in recruiting, whatever they tell you in your job profiles, the gaps are there. Even if they tell you, you are supposed to run this, you're supposed to, the gaps are there. So that's the first step, is to really say, okay, I have a power gap, I have a trust gap. So with the trust gap, why don't we start there? I mean, the trust gap is clearly the one that basically suggests, you know, we talk about CX, but I can't prove it so well, right? Does it really make, you know, and so what do you do, right? I mean, and by the way, we should remember, a lot of company senior leaders are quite rational people. So if you love customer experience, you think like, you should get it, right? That's so important. Well, there are people who don't, because they are much more rational, much more focused on some numbers, short-term driven and so on. So a big part and I have two strategies I like to highlight today. The first one is you need to find a way to make customer experience relevant to the company agenda. So I give you an example. Just imagine you work for a bank and you're in the middle of a financial crisis, and your CEO is extremely worried about cash, that the bank needs to save money. Your CEO is extremely worried about regulation, whether, there will be big laws coming on not allowing you to do your business. And perhaps your CEO is very worried about some acquisition problems because maybe someone wants to buy you and now the stock is down and so on, right? Just imagine, that's the situation. In this situation, it just will be really difficult to have a sensible customer experience debate, because improving the customer experience will not matter for the top 3 objectives that your CEO has, right? Cash crisis. Well, it may actually, but we'll come to this. A regulation or acquisition things. But you need to understand this. So everybody on the call, when you talk about customer experience in your company, if you want to close the trust gap, the first thing you try to figure out is what's actually on the mind of the people who are making the decisions. And is CX at all relevant? Yeah? Now, unless the company is in a big crisis and is all about cash, CX will be relevant. I don't think there is any CEO in the world who says it doesn't matter what customers think. It's not like this, right? So first of all, figure out what the agenda is. But then secondly, of course, you have that future problem. And I'd say when people go into the C-suite and say, hey, we need to do all these wonderful things in customer experience and to do this and that and that and that and that, for many CEOs, what they're hearing is cost, 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 more cost, even more cost, and even more cost, right? Because they think, I don't know, right? It's a good idea, but does it really matter? So for the trust, sorry, Frank, if I'm too lengthy, then just cut me, Frank. But I'd say to close the trust gap, yes, understand the agenda, but secondly, try to figure out what customer experience actually does. And it's very nice to read in glossy brochures and blogs that it's all about CX and it's all about this and it's all about that. But I'll tell you what, people talk about CX, everything matters. And then, the fastest growing retail chains in many countries are discounters with a crap experience because it's cheaper. The United Airlines I told you about, they drag passengers over a plane. Well, they just had a record year. So I think what's important in customer experience, you have to understand the economic impact of the experience you want to create. No CEO will take you serious if just you talk about all the wonderful experience you want to do, because they think you're just adding cost, 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 cost. But if you can say, look, here's 10 things we could do, right? We could shorten the queues in the shop. We could have a faster call center. We could drop prices a little bit. We could make, the service nicer. And we've done a list. And by the way, those 2 or those 3, they'll make us the most money. However, this one takes forever, while those ones are fast. If you have a discussion like this about CX, trust me, every CEO in this world will want to sit at the same table and want to listen and look at the data and want to talk to you.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that's basically about the trust gap. In other words, if you can make a prediction that will come somehow true, then you bringing facts to the table and you are gain trust. If this prediction is basically linked to financial outcomes,
totally,
it does, right?
Yeah, because look, the C-suite people, right? The average people that I know in the C-suite, they think about revenue and about cost and about some long-term organizational questions. And if you're not talking revenue, cost, or long-term organizational issues, you're not on the agenda. So yeah, it's not optional to link it to outcome. No, it's the entry ticket. Yeah. Now, then of course, Frank, and you of course know this, even with the best tools in the world, you'll sometimes be wrong because you do something and then it rains. Yeah, then, okay, we can't change that. But if you have a proper debate and saying, this is the estimate, here's what we believe it will cost, here's what we believe it will bring, and let's do a pilot, let's prove this. I tell you what, you'll have a lot of very good customer experience debates in the C-suite.
Mm-hmm. And what about the power gap?
Well, that's another story. right? So totally different story. Now, here's the thing. Now, let's assume for a second you get your CEO to agree, you get your CEO to see your data, you run a proper analysis, you see the revenue benefits, da, da, da. Maybe you pick those two things, right? And then, I don't know, maybe you want to have, don't know, everybody super friendly in the call center, you want to measure it, right? And you want shorter queues in the shop, so you need more people at different times, whatever you want to do. Well, that's nice if your CEO agrees. Perhaps your CEO tells you, great, go lead, right? And there you are with no reporting power, supposed to implement something that is tricky. So rule number one, as a customer experience leader, never promise anybody in the company that you are in charge of customer experience, because you're not. That's it. You are not. But you can do something that's very different and even more powerful. Why is finance so powerful? At least in the companies I know, finance is super powerful, right? Everybody looks at when finance, complains, everybody listens. Why? Because finance knows how everybody is performing. Isn't that amazing, right? Finance can say, this country, this department, this unit, they're doing better, they're doing worse. And the CEO wants to hear this. So if you cannot own customer experience, if you cannot control it, this next best thing you can do is show how everybody is doing. Just imagine, right? You had just had your CEO discussion and you had agreed that shorter shop queues will, benefit the company, make more profit, and a friendlier call center will benefit the company and make more profit. Just imagine you had those, right? Now just imagine you would measure every month through the most basic research. I mean, you've all done Net Promoter and all the other wonderful things, the basic measurements, like how are we performing, right? And you put that data in front of everybody. Well, I'll tell you what, there comes a point when you don't even need to say anything, because the data will speak to itself. Nobody wants to be in the bottom right corner, where the worst department is. So you got to use the power of data, not to control the experience, but to shed light on how everybody is doing. And trust me, if you have proper data, no, not some random stuff, but proper data, and basically customer data, basic customer feedback, 55% of people think our queues are still too long and I hate it. And next month, 60% of people now believe the queues are too long and they hate it, and so on. You will put a lot of pressure on the people. And that pressure will allow you to reduce that power gap, reduce the gap, because you can't control the experience, but you can shed light and you can become as powerful as finance. Show the right data.
Very interesting. So, Thomas, I'm well prepared.
Yeah.
So, actually, those two gaps we can overcome with first transparency.
Uh-huh. Agree.
Second, predictions. So basically, making quantify basically what you actually bring and how valid your actually insights are. And I would even add to the transparency one point, because there is first the transparency on what's actually happening in CX. Yeah? Uh-huh. How is everyone performing? Mm-hmm. And the second type of transparency is also what is important and what's not important, isn't it?
Yeah, you're totally right. And I think perhaps in my thinking, I put that into the prediction, but you're right. I mean, as a customer experience expert, you have to understand, and it's both transparency and it's part of the prediction, what matters. And if the queues in the shop don't matter, right? Let's not worry about them now. Then there is a queue and we'll live with it. So, this to me is like the number one principle. You cannot run customer experience program not even knowing what matters. It's no option, right? Because otherwise the discounter chains, right, Aldi and Lidl, they would have people packing your boxes and someone, offering you all sorts of wonderful services in store, because you would love this, but of course it wouldn't make them any money. So that's why they don't have it, and they understand this. So no. Yeah, of course, Frank. So it's like, this is the condition, right? You need to know what matters.
Very good. So how can we bring more details on that? So I would like to show a solution, actually CX AI solution, which basically addresses those two gaps, the transparency gap and the prediction gap. And it's a very quick demo on that. Actually, it works with a very simple data source: your customer experience measurement and text feedback of customers, why they are satisfied or loyal or disloyal. With this, a two-stage AI analyzes that and makes it insights accessible in a simple dashboard. So actually, we have on the left side descriptives. So how is the NPS, detractor, promoter, what is the trend, and so forth. And on the right side, it's not descriptive, but prescriptive. So it explains why the NPS is as it is. We can make it larger, and every bubble is a theme, a topic people mention. Yeah, and they just categorized. For instance, this one is very important. The impact is found by the AI, and the y-axis is the frequency. How often do people say they react fast? You can actually look into all the comments. And here you basically see, okay, we need to improve here, and we need to reduce this, right? So it brings you transparency in what's important, what's impactful. There are more features where basically the question, why does the NPS improved? And typically everyone finds a different answer for that, but this is a analysis which finds that, okay, of course, only if something changes and it is important, then it is the core reason. And it is a perfect, it's a bridge, an explanation bridge, which our financial leaders are very trained to read. There is a causal diagram, but then we come to the topic of prediction. So it includes a predictor, and we can now simulate what is when not 6%, but 12% of my customers say that the company react fast to inquiries. Then we can predict that the NPS improves by 4.9 points. This is the basis of a quite fruitful discussion. What should we do to drive CX?
Yeah. That's a question, Frank. I mean, thanks. This is actually fascinating, and we had a chat before, of course, the call to talk about what we want to talk about. But I haven't seen any of these tools now in that detail, which is amazing. But how do you get that from? I mean, I understand you're using basically existing NPS measurement, but how can a tool do this magic as it was with that? Two questions.
For this, I need to draw a backup slide here.
Okay, if you're too fast, then let me know.
No, that's great. So that's of course what people asking. Mm-hmm. Exactly, we are drawing and building on very simple data. Mm-hmm. CX measurement with the quantitative on the left, and on the right unstructured text. And we can explain even most of them better than with lengthy quantitative questionnaires why people are loyal and others don't. And how does it work? It is a two-stage AI process. The first process is basically you need to quantify the text information. And of course, you could do it by manual coding, right? Which is very expensive, takes a long time, and it is subjective. Every new coder will code something different, so it's inconsistent. Yeah, and once you have that, you can try to explain customer measurement. And it is even not enough to quantify the text, because what we found is that the most often mentioned reasons are not always the most impactful ones.
That's right.
Actually, they are top of mind, but there are some seldom mentioned topics which, when they are happening, are really driving CX.
Got it. So which means from all the noise you get, right, in these feedback, and I've seen these people looking at these, right, because people can type and then you get this like long lists of everything. And sometimes I've seen people saying, oh, you know, this comes up all the time. But what you're saying is it doesn't mean that it's important. It could mean that something that actually doesn't come up a lot is actually more important for the outcome, right, than the stuff that you read on all these reports because it has been around a lot.
Exactly, and often we see that longer text doesn't always mean better explanation.
That's right.
It really depends. And some companies which we meet with, they ask, you know what, that's interesting. Actually, we tried this last year. We have Qualtrics or Medallion package. We tried this. We have the text analytics there, and we have key drive analytics. So, and actually, they tell me it didn't work. So, does yours? and yeah, let me quickly highlight why this works now, because it builds on proper AI. The main reason is basically that those two steps, the text analytics part and the key driver part, is built on more flexible and more powerful techniques. Actually, for the text analytics part, we did a huge study 1.5 years ago, comparing many different software systems. Mm-hmm. Actually, most software systems you have in out-of-the-box systems, and you may know, are unsupervised learning. They are so widespread because they are so easy to use. You just upload your text and it spits out categories by itself, untrained, unsupervised. So, and often it reads well what they find, very generic categories, but yeah. But the real proof is if you take those categories and try to predict how loyal or how satisfied a consumer is. Yeah. Which we found is that typically 0.4 in R square, so basically 40% of the variance you understand with that, which is much less than manual coding. Yeah. Manual coding, this is an example we explained, 0.7. Uh-huh. We tried also supervised learning approaches. There are open source Python and R packages, which was much better. So supervised is basically you train the machine. Yeah, you code some hundred of examples, you build the code book by yourself, and the machine learns how a human would code a certain text. Okay. And actually, we were near to give up, but we found a platform which turned out to be able to code a similar quality as humans do. And for several reasons. Two reasons are it produces not just the binary coding, but it gives a prediction, a probability prediction, and it tells you also if it's unsure. And humans are also unsure sometimes when coding, right? And this is a more rich information source. And second, the sentiment turned out to be much more predictive than a sentiment a coder would produce. It is built out of millions of Amazon ratings, so sentiment machine. Yeah. And I wanted to show this to illustrate it's not it's important to not use just any kind of tool out of your toolbox. You need to take the right tool to really gain valid insights.
And I guess that to a large extent, for example, depends on people like the people also on the call who are the real experts who are understanding what's going on. I think what you see sometimes in the C-suite, sometimes see some fancy tool and it just need to put a label AI on top and everybody's really excited. But I think what you're saying here is there is quite a difference in quality And I think that, I mean, we know this also from other research, right, from brand research and others, that you can do two studies and get very similar, different results depending on how good your method is. So I think what you are showing here seems to be a very, very sophisticated and precise when it comes to analyzing the word clouds we're getting.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what the actual impact is.
Actually, the proof is in the pudding. So you can do any analytics, but at the end, the results should be also turn out to be meaningful. And if short or long, your team will find out if they can trust the machine.
Well, the CEO will find out if they can trust your team, because if you start to predict and if you start to talk about the future and it's nonsense, right? You won't last very long. So if you go this route, you better go, I guess, with proper data.
Yeah. Exactly. And the same is true for the second part, the key driver analysis. If you use a conventional key driver analysis, your analytics fell short, because key driver analysis assumes basically the more the better. There's a linear relationship, and second, your categories are independent from each other. But sometimes sound and quality needs to be good at the same time. This is called an interaction. It's not covered in key driver analysis. Same with sentiment. Eventually, sound drives sentiment, and sentiment drives customer measurement. So there's a science of causal analysis which is not covered by simple out-of-the-box solutions. I may even illustrate that with this chart. So you have the categories, and they show sometimes indirect effects, and actually a key driver analysis, typically a regression, explains only direct effects. But in this case, this is an example where the sound is basically an emotional matter and is expressed by the sentiment of the text. And actually what AI is doing is it finds out how important are those causal links here. They have a nice animation. This is conventional key driver analysis. The algorithm is fixed. You only find the parameters. And AI, what AI is different is you find the algorithm which can predict the outcome with explanatory information without knowing how things relate to each other. And that's why it explains much better, actually much better, why customers are loyal and others don't. And actually, this can be even proven. So we compared, for instance, here the explanation power R square. This is an example. Typically, the case that it's 40–50% higher. Better explains the direct effects. Plus, there are indirect effects. The emotional part, especially, and sometimes other indirect effects. So on average, we explain by factor 2 better why people are more loyal, have a better customer experience, and so forth. Wow. So this is measured on data.
Can I ask you a question, Frank? I've seen this. I looked a little bit at AI and causal analytics, of course. Before we also, for some people who know, for 12 Powers, we've done a causal analytics study, and it, of course, hugely powerful. This is so obvious, right? That proper causal AI will give you much better results, and basically your prediction will be better. The quality of what you say will be better. Why on earth are we still using these like regressions? And again, I'm not a math expert, not at all. In fact, I had to really push myself to do math, and I've done it again in business school. And it wasn't like I did it to challenge myself. It wasn't my hobby, but it was very obvious that these linear regressions aren't really that good. Why is everybody still using them rather than widely available better methods? Can that be explained?
So if I only knew. So actually, it turns out that that any innovative approaches take a long time. This is an education issue, but also has something to do with organizational mechanisms. And we see that actually the AI we use today, most of them was already developed 30 years or 20 years ago.
It's called AI now.
Yeah, and it was in the so I started 93 there was a first boom of AI, yeah, and then it was named data mining, and after that it was named predictive analytics, and now it's AI again. So it takes time. So that's actually when you think of marketing mix modeling, it get more and more used, but basically not everyone is doing it. Unilever introduced that 100 years ago, 1919. They did the first marketing mix modeling. So actually it takes some time, but there is no reason to start, no reason to not start.
That's right. And to be honest, I think what strikes me when you say this, I think it also has a lot to do with the new power we want to give to people like the people on the call who have for years just presented reports and people just walked over them. I think it's all about raising the game. And I think when you start to trust your own analysis more, when you see, damn it, there is something that is just so much more, that it's so predictive, so much better, I think will give you more confidence. Because ultimately, the people in the C-suite will not understand the stuff we're talking about. They'll just get a report and they'll look at this and will say, you're either right or wrong. But I guess that to me is also, maybe that's just a thought that I have here, is that we need to help everybody on the call to build that power, that trust in the data, and then lean out of the window a bit and say, here is a predictive analysis, and let's do this, and let me show you how this works. And I think you can only do this if you have quality analysis that you trust. So I think it's actually a revolution we can start on the shop floor with the people who are on the call and people in their teams, rather than waiting for the CEO to one day tell you which tools to use, because they won't. And if you wait for IT, it's the same thing. They'll just buy some tool. I think this is you need the experts. The experts need to start raising their hand and saying, this is how we need to do this. Anyways, I think it's an injection, Frank. I don't know if it just got to me when I listened to you.
Right. So actually, we have max 15 minutes left.
Okay.
Before we come to final Q&A, it might be a good idea to show one or two short cases.
Oh, that I was just asking if you could do a case, because that always makes it real, right?
Yeah. So I have 1 or 2, 3 cases here. One is cases from the wireless speaker company Sonos, and they actually survey any new customer and any old customer as well, and interview them about their customer experience and asking a simple question, why. And they leveraged CXAI as one of the first customers, and actually they dared to do a prediction. Yeah? They saw, okay, this is what we should focus on, and if we are successful to make our speakers more reliable in 1 point, our NPS will rise by 5 points. And actually, maybe luck, maybe it was the capacity. It was quite spot on, and this really drove the acceptance in the C-suite, and they shifted large investments towards making it more reliable. Although there were not a big issue compared to competitors, it was driving decisions basically. And the metrics I showed you before basically looked like that. You see the impact, basically the total importance of a topic people mentioning, and the frequency. And actually, every second customer says, "Oh, because of the sound, I'm quite happy. I'm recommend that because of the great sound." But what analysis shows you that this might be true, but improving that, so making more people mentioning it, will not make a lot of a difference. Instead, 6% say, "Oh, it has a fantastic overall performance in terms of reliability, and it works really well. It's so reliable to use." And if someone says that, it is a real boost towards their overall rating. So one example how this can be eye-opening, because this field here is called hidden, because you wouldn't have seen it if you just look at frequencies.
Got it.
Another interesting point is that the analysis and the approach and the process will give you new topics coming up along the way. So the latest speakers had a voice assistant, and suddenly it pops out to be an important factor to focus on. That's although it is supervised coding, it still can learn and can gets better in every wave. Behind that analysis, behind that impact score is a causal diagram, a causal network, where you see, for instance, that we have emotional factors like sound quality. It has totally indirect effect. And you have rational features like access to music, which is basically, they want to have it, and it is really a rational feature. Maybe 1 minute to more examples. One is here an example of an insurance company. Again, the most mentioned reasons why they are loyal or recommend the company is the great personal customer service, which is top of mind and which maybe people say without, if they don't think too much, right? But when people, 5% say, my contact person, he's really trustworthy, he's an honest guy, he's reliable, and he's fair, I think you can really feel that this is probably more impactful. And it makes sense afterwards, but it is good to have an analysis which can basically find those gold which you can translate into actions. Maybe final examples. We did that for mobile carrier, and for mobile carrier it is well known that, of course, the coverage, the connectivity is key, and addresses and attracts new customers. But what really makes them loyal? Why do they leave? And we ask the same question: what is would you recommend your own carrier, and why? And it turned out that coverage, most often mentioned, is not the biggest driver. It is actually the plan, which is, if is positive, it has strong impact, or if it's negative, it has a strong negative impact. So it gains you insights that are new but plausible, and it turned out in a prediction tool that it is predictive. So and that's the power of the approach. So we can basically close with final questions. So we talked about challenges of CX leaders and the power and trust gap that transparency and predictions can help to overcome those gaps. Thomas, what would you think? What questions do we have left?
Sorry, what questions do I believe we have left?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think first of all, we've given, I mean, I've been listening to you again, just made me realize how much insight there can be in customer experience. So that was actually quite amazing. So I'm pretty sure people on the call but might have one or two questions for themselves. I mean, I think some things that came up to me. I mean, I love this dashboard, by the way, because I love its simplicity. My hunch is that it's like a standard, or could you do it? I mean, like for someone in a different way, or is it like can you customize this?
Yeah. So first of all, it is there are some easy options to customize that. So you can customize. So basically, we do that for you: the colors, the logos, and even what kind of parts are in or basically ghosted.
Yeah.
So that's and it is even it's just a JavaScript based software which can run without installation on any computer, internal server, or whatever.
Okay.
So that's an easy part, but of course there are a few companies who don't want to use other dashboard tools anymore. Yeah, they want to stick with Power BI or all these other big names. And actually behind those dashboard is a simple CSV or Excel data file, which is standardized, and the client is free to use those, because this is a basic what is shown here, to build his own dashboard, to basically rebuild our dashboard. That's perfectly doable, because this is why we have a very simple data interface.
What languages, by the way, this is English, right? What languages can you do?
Actually, every language. Really? So the text analytics platform is perfectly working on 36 languages and has trained sentiment models on that.
Right.
And any other language can be also integrated with the translation tool.
Okay.
Which is automated and is in use basically.
And if I'd say like, oh, this is awesome, I want to have this, like, what does it take? Is it like a longer IT project, or how do I get to this thing? And how long does it take me to show my first proper data to the top leaders of the company? So
actually, this is very, very simple. So what we need is a data sheet. Basically, this CX data, they are, no matter if it's 10,000 or 100,000, it all fits in a simple Excel sheet, right? Wow. So, and this simple Excel sheet is all what we need and what we get. You put it on your SFTP server. This is then coded. It is modeled and then fed it to the. So it's a process which takes a few days. When we do it the first time, we take more time. But actually, it is you can even do a demo with your data free of charge. We will take your data, do simple coding and modeling on top of that, and you can get those dashboards, which you can put on your own computer or whatever. And so I have even a chart here for the process. So this is your data. We get that, and there is a two-step process of coding the machine, training the machine to code everything else, modeling it, and feeding the dashboard. The dashboard sits on your side. It doesn't need any installations. So it's quite easy and simple, the whole process. Awesome, pretty clear. Fantastic. So any other question? We are quite at top of the hour. So Thomas, let me thank you so much for your time today. It was really fun to talk with you and to hear all those inspirational ideas from your side. Thank you. Thank you, and to everyone on your call.
step up. I think the world needs people, and companies need people to take CX, in their hand and get going and push the guys in the C-suite and push the colleagues to actually make it happen. So good luck with this.